Welcome to my YouTube channel. So today I decided to disassemble this little water pump that I bought for like €5 because there's a little water pump in it that I wanted to use for one of my projects. So I decided to use an old phone charger to connect to the little water pump because right now it was working on AA batteries, but of course you need to change them, and I think it's way better to use an old phone charger. So I'm just stripping the wires and then I'm going to connect them to this little water pump, but I'm also going to add some cable in between them to make it longer, of course. So I just went on by stripping the wires, and then I also was looking at the hose, the water hose that I was going to use to make the waterfall. The existing hose was fitting right into the thicker hose that I bought, luckily for me, so I could make one long part. So I cut the part to pieces at the desirable length, and then I went on with the connection between the phone charger and the water pump. This is the cables I'm going to use, some loudspeaker cables. It's just easier to work with. So I cut approximately 2 meters of cable, so I would have more than enough room to find a socket nearby the terrarium. To connect wires, I just strip them, then twist them around each other, fold them over, and then put some electrical tape over it. I don't have any soldering equipment, but I think it's always been working great for me this way, so why should I buy it? So put some electrical tape over the black wire, then the same thing with the red wire to make sure that there's no contact. I then use some yellow electrical tape on top of both of them to make it more sturdy, and then I went on by adding some shrinking tube on top of it all to give it a more aesthetically pleasing look. So this is it. And then I did the same thing at the other side, so connecting the cable to the little water pump, just same thing, twisting the wires, folding them over, adding the electrical tape on top of it. Oh no, actually here I use my hot glue gun because this part is going to be in the terrarium and it's of course going to get wet, so I want to make sure that no water would be touching these wires, so I use my hot glue gun for that. This is the finished product. Doesn't look that great, but I know that it's going to work, so I tested the pump and luckily everything was working great. Then I went on to add some electrical tape on top of the hot glue to make it look better. Same thing with the red wire, and then I slid over the shrinking tube to give it a more aesthetically pleasing look. I also added some hot glue at the beginning and the end of the shrinking tube to make sure that no water would be entering this. So this is the finished product. Doesn't look great, but I know it's safe and it's going to do the trick. Next up, I went on by using a sponge as the filtration system for the pump. So no need to buy any expensive filters, you can just do it with a regular sponge. I used some hot glue to push it on the back of the container. I also added some meshing net on top of the sponge and then went on to put some glue on the water pump and also stick it to the back of the container. This is how it's going to look like with the meshing net on top. I went on by adding the water into it, and what can you see? The whole structure comes undone. So apparently when you use hot glue and you put it on glass, when you add water into the mix, then it comes undone. So don't use that as a permanent fix. You need to use silicone. Silicone is going to stick to the glass, hot glue is not. So little mistake on my part, but you can learn from it. I then went on by adding the whole structure back into place and adding some silicone also at the back of it for a permanent fix. Now we can start stacking the stones. I began by putting the stones in without silicone, so that I would see if I had enough stones and in what order I would like to put them to have the nicest waterfall possible. Once I was happy with the result and I saw that I had enough stones, I could start using silicone to make sure that the whole structure would stay in place. I used a lot of silicone because it was quite heavy. I managed to conceal the hose, so I was quite happy with that. And then I went on by adding some black sand into the wet silicone to hide it a little bit better. This is the next day when the silicone was cured. I went on by testing it out and seeing what result I would have with the waterfall. I was quite pleased with it, so I could go on to the next step. So this is the part I most enjoy. It's when I can add the plants into the whole structure. I decided for this one to only use 2 types of mosses, and I glued them on the structure with some super glue. I also added some black sand on top of the super glue to conceal it and give it a more natural look. I also added a little piece of bark that had some moss on top of it at the top of the structure, and it all brought it all together, so I was really pleased with that. I went to test it out with the lamp that I'm going to use later on. Again, put some water into it and tested it out, and I was really pleased with the result. Look at that, stunning. Now we can work on the lid with the lamp built into it. So I went on by cutting a slit in the back of the lid and then sanding it down to give it a more finished look. This is the lamp I'm going to use, but as you can see it's really short, so I need to add some cable in between so that I don't have to find a socket nearby the terrarium and I can place it wherever I want. To do that, you of course need to cut the lamp in half and then add the cable in between these 2 parts to make it longer. So this is the same thing as in the beginning. I just stripped the wires, make sure that the copper was visible so I could connect the cable in between and make it longer. Same thing, I just connect the copper wires, twist them and fold them over, add some electrical tape on top of that, and then afterwards I add the electrical shrinking tube. I did the same thing at the back of the lamp, again connecting the wires, putting some electrical tape on top of that and the shrinking tube to finish it off. This is the finished product. So I went on to test the lamp and it was working great. I also saw that depending on where I put the lamp, I got a different shadow casting on the rocks. So I decided to put the lamp more in the front of the lid, use some hot glue to do this. I also added a little bit of hot glue at the base of the lamp to make it even sturdier. Then I could finish it off by adding the sand into the terrarium. I used some fine black sand and also added some bigger rocks at the base of the terrarium to make it a more gradual shift from the big rocks to the fine sand. As a last step, I could go on by adding the water into it. And then here you have it. The finished product with the dimmable light built into it. And of course the working water pump. And of course Kitty approves. So I'm gonna let you guys enjoy some close-ups now. I would just like to say that this was a really fun project to work on. I think everybody can do this if you just have the right equipment. You can go out into nature to pick up some stones, some mosses, and it didn't take that much time and it was really a lot of fun, so I would definitely recommend it. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.